video where we're actually going to be recapping the past couple legislative weeks. Again, my name is Matt Revel. I'm the Director of Policy and Communications for the Delaware State Senate Republican Caucus, and I am joined with Senator Pettyjohn. Senator, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Matt.
This video is actually going to be fairly unique because we're going to be breaking up into two segments, first being Senator Pettyjohn, followed up by Senator Lawson. But first off, Senator Pettyjohn, I just wanted to touch on two of the important pieces of gun legislation that made their way through the State Senate a couple weeks ago. The first being Senate Bill 3 and Senate Bill 6. So didn't know if you could provide us with a status update and maybe give those viewing kind of a recap of what each bill does.
Yeah, so Senate Bill 3 is the permit to purchase for Delaware. What it does, it creates a process where an individual who wishes to buy a handgun, not a long gun, a rifle or a shotgun, but a handgun, a process where they have to obtain training at their own cost. They have to undergo a background check through the State Bureau of Identification, get fingerprinted at their own cost, and receive approval from the Department of Safety and Homeland Security before they are issued a card, which they would take to a FFL, Federal Firearm Licensed Dealer here in Delaware, in order to buy their firearm. Now these cards would be good for, I believe it was 6 months. 6 month, 1 day. If they wanted to buy another firearm, they would have to start the process over again in order to obtain that firearm. The status of that, it passed the Senate and is over in the House. I believe the Judiciary Committee in the House. It's been assigned over there. Senate Bill 6 is a magazine capacity limit. It limits capacity of magazines here in Delaware to 17 rounds or less. It does not grandfather in any existing magazines that are owned by most individuals in Delaware. If you possess a concealed carry permit, you're allowed to keep those magazines, and I believe there are some other exclusions as well. But generally, for the vast majority of Delawareans, upon enactment of that bill and funding, those magazines, if they were in possession of them, would be a crime in Delaware. There was a buyback provision for those magazines. The bill provided an amount of $10 per magazine if an individual wanted to sell those to the state of Delaware. And I tell you, $10 a magazine is well below what a market value or purchase value of those magazines would have been. And that also did pass the Senate with all of our caucus, all the Republican caucus, and Senator Ennis voting no on those. And that also, Senate Bill 6 has also been assigned to the Judiciary Committee in the House.
Now, Senator, as you well know, these bills, like you mentioned, were heard in the Senate Judiciary Committee, which you're a member.
Yes.
But there's been a lot of discussion surrounding the process of the committee, especially how it was taking place virtually. What were your takeaways from how that was run, or at least how that was handled?
I wasn't happy with the process. The public was allotted. It was a 2-hour committee hearing for both bills. After the presentation of the bills and direct questioning of the sponsor and some witnesses by members of the committee, the public was allotted 60 seconds per person to testify on that bill. 60 seconds is not a lot of time to express how you feel about a bill and the reasoning. I mean, you can say, I'm opposed to the bill or I support the bill, but that's not, as policymakers and lawmakers, that's not what we want to hear. We want to know why. You know, that's our question, is to ask the why and hear the why behind why an individual may support or oppose a bill. And 60 seconds is not nearly long enough to be able to get that depth of understanding as to why one of our constituents may support or oppose a particular piece of legislation that we have coming before us. One of the things that was most disappointing is that at 60 seconds, or very close to that, the person was cut off. No, please wrap up. No real chance for them to even come close to completing a thought, whether it was mid-sentence or mid-word. Their audio was cut off at that point in time, and then we moved on to the next person. With something, with a bill that really affects and has an impact on so many people here within the state of Delaware, the individuals who are speaking should have had a longer amount of time to speak, and the committee hearing also should have been a lot longer to allow more people to be able to weigh in on that bill, or on these two bills.
Now, as Representative Lynn, who's the chairman, of course, of the House Judiciary Committee, I know earlier, I believe it was actually last week, he released kind of the guidelines for how it's going to be followed in the House. Could you outline those guidelines, and if you think that was an overall maybe a better process?
Yeah. Well, first, it was a better process. He's allowing 2 committee meetings, 1 for each bill, on separate days, and each committee is going to be a 4-hour committee length, which is significantly longer, of course, than we had for the bills over in the Senate. A total of 2 hours in the Senate for the 2 bills. Over in the House, it's going to be a total of 8 hours for the 2 bills. You're going to be able to get a lot more input from the public, and be able to have more people have their voices heard, whether they support or oppose these bills, than you were able to over here in the Senate. I'm very supportive of how he's doing it. You know, I would still like to have the committee meetings in person. You know, find a venue somewhere which is large enough to hold the people that want to come in. You know, whether you line them up outside, however you want to do it. For something like this, we really need to be looking eye to eye with the public, with the people that are going to be affected by these pieces of legislation, and have those meetings be absolutely in person. But I will say, the way Representative Lynn is holding this is a marked improvement over how it was handled in our chamber.
Now, during the committee hearing, we heard from a number of impassioned individuals on both sides, but there were a couple that really stuck out. I know one gentleman was representing an African American Second Amendment advocacy organization, and he noted the economic impact that it could have, the negative economic impact it could have on some of our minority population. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's a minority population or just the poorer population in Delaware, you're actually putting, because of the requirement for training that has to be paid for, and some of those trainings are several $100s a piece, plus the background check and the fingerprinting, which I believe the cost for that is $65 now. It is a bar to exercising that right. So you're having to pay a fee in order to exercise a right that you're guaranteed by our constitutions, and that's an issue. That's an issue. I mean, and we're really talking about SB 3 for that one, for the permit to purchase, and it is an issue. I don't know of any other right that we have that you have to pay such an amount to be able to get a permit to exercise that right. You know, you don't need to pay a permit to write a letter to the editor and have it pay a fee for a permit to have a letter to the editor published in the newspaper, to vote. You don't have to, you know, have a permit to vote. You know, you don't have to have a permit to go to church. There's a lot of things that we do, that we have rights to do, that you don't need a permit. And I think that this is a definite problem with SB 3. And that we are requiring, you know, under penalty of being prosecuted for a felony, to have a permit to exercise a right, and that's wrong.
So really, in the aftermath of not just that committee hearing, but the many committee hearings that have taken place over the course of this year, there's been an even stronger call from the public, and a growing call from within this building here about allowing the public back in, allowing our constituents to view and take part in our legislative process in person, be it, I say here, so be it here at Legislative Hall or at one of the various large venues around Dover. So, Senator, what are your thoughts to the amount of time that the public has been shut out of Legislative Hall?
It's over 400 days now, and it's far too long. The public is supposed to be part of our legislative process. You know, I like to say that the legislative process we have is a deliberative process, where you deliberate, where you look at the facts, where you weigh everything, including the opinion of the public. That's not always the final answer, but the public input to public laws that we pass are an extremely important part of that. And to not have the public have access to the building where we should be operating, we should be holding session here. Most other states are doing that in person, but to pretty much lock them out of the building and having them have to meet us outside our place of business, where the business of the people is conducted, has to change. We need the public here, whether it's here or at another venue, that you can have that public interaction. We're creative people. We can figure something out. There's plenty of places, whether it's Del Tech, Del State, Dover Downs, they've got large areas where the public can go in and safely be able to have their voices heard and be part of the process. That's the direction that we need to go, 100%. And making the public only be able to interact with us via Zoom, while I think that's good for additional access, there's no way that it can replace the in-person access that really a lot of Delawareans, that's the only way they have to contact us and to have their voices heard in those committees is in person, because of some of the broadband issues that we have here in Delaware. And that's a subject for another conversation. But replacing in person with Zoom long term, I don't think is something that we can do. We always have to have in person. We always have to have that option for somebody to come in and testify in front of us, look us right in the eye, and tell us how they feel about a piece of legislation that's up for debate. Whether it's a bill relating to the Second Amendment, whether it has to deal with health care, whether it has to deal with education and our children, whether it has to deal with public safety, whatever the issue is, the public should be able to look us in the eye and tell us what they think.
Well, for this next segment, we're going to be joined by Senator Lawson, who represents the 15th Senate District over towards the Marydale area, and really it's almost the entire western portion of Kent County.
Runs from Clayton, Route 6, all the way down to Route 14 in Harrington.
So earlier this week, there was a rally in front of Legislative Hall. All the participants in that rally were calling for reopening, but really the reopening of Legislative Hall to allow the people back in to take part in the legislative process. What were your thoughts on the rally on Tuesday?
Well, first of all, it's very good to see people involved, because heretofore we haven't seen much of that. And more people are getting involved, and that's what government's about, is personal involvement. You may not think that politics has anything to do with you, or you don't have anything to do with politics, but politics has everything to do with you. And this rally was well done. It was put together by the Patriots for Delaware, and they brought in a lot of folks came and did the posters up, and the emphasis was getting them back into their building. This building that we sit in now is not ours, it's theirs. And they went back in, and they should be. I think it's time that we get Delaware back on its feet instead of hiding and bowing to the Fauci fears, and get things back as near as we can to normal as quickly as possible. And I think that there's other states that have opened up and proven that it's safe to do so. And I think Delaware should follow suit of Texas and Florida and not be continuing to hide. I know they say the numbers are continuing to go up, and we have to be careful. I think 14 days of flattening the curve is long gone. What are we now, 406 days that the public's been locked out of their home?
Yeah, at the time of this recording.
That's not right. So the rally was well done, and I appreciate them being there.
Senator, I know you were invited to actually sit outside and partake in the Zoom session out there amongst the rally attendees. What was the general feedback that you received following that?
feedback was very positive. They were appreciative of someone standing up with them and being involved in their plight to get back into the building. It was neat that I was able to Zoom from out there and with them behind. And the atmosphere was one of sincere concern about getting back in, but at the same time having an air of camaraderie. They were actually back together, and people were being able to communicate and be around each other. And that, I think the thing that really cemented it for me were the two children that were there. They came up, and one young lady wanted a picture, and so her brother came up. But the whole thing was we were doing it for them. That's what the whole thing, it's the future. And if we don't correct it now, their future is bleak, very, very bleak. And those two children being there really drove the message home how critical it is that we fix this government now.
Well, thank you, Senator Lawson, and thank you, Senator Pettyjohn, for joining me today to discuss all these very important issues. But thank you again, each of you who are viewing this and for taking part in our legislative process. Again, I know I've mentioned it and the senators have multiple times. We work for you. So be sure to like and subscribe to our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube channel. Reach out to any of us if you have any questions about the legislation that you've had. And also be sure to sign up for your senators and our caucus's email newsletter. So with that said, I'll see you next week. Thank you.